Hi, and welcome to our Just Pause practice. Just pause. Yeah, I want you still to breathe. Don't stop your breathing because that gets complicated, right? I like to tease that the only requirement for yoga here at Life's Work is to breathe. Everything else is optional. But when it comes to the pause, yeah, we still need to breathe. We still need to find that grounding place. And this gives not just credence to Patanjali's work of the 8-limbed path, the Ashtanga Yoga, written in the Yoga Sutras. The 8 limbs start with our yamas and niyamas. Well, what else brings to light where there might be imbalance and out of alignmentness than pausing for introspection? So we're not going to necessarily do anything specifically with yamas and niyamas, but they always show up when we pause. Then we find our landing pose. We find a comfortable asana that can be sustained so that our body doesn't have to do the work of holding itself. It's held in the moment. And that allows us to shift our energy first to the pranayama, right? The breathing, to feel life force as it moves in and out. We can't pause if we're not living, right? That's just death. So there's a component of being still and still having some movement from the breath as we move into then the final 4 stages of Patanjali's Ashtanga, Pratyahara, turning our senses inward. Looking in. Going in is the way out? Yes. But the way out is not always without challenge. And that's where we focus, dharana. And if we focus and we flex those muscles of confidence and competence, if we repeat the practice consistently and diligently with good counsel, with good coaching, with good teachers to help us witness and observe and expand our knowledge, it will become easier. And that's the dhyana state, the flow state. And if we're lucky, that's the best word I have for it, from dhyana we might fall into, trip into, accidentally arrive at even moments of bliss, of samadhi, or that 8th limb of the 8-limb path. So, how are you in your being? Are you ready for a pause? Or is pausing feeling a little threatening, a little interrupting in the sense that I need to move? And sometimes it's just a reflection of where we are in our day, where we are in our life's path. So whether you need to walk to have some level of movement, or you need to rest and recline, or kind of the middle of those 2 options is to be upright, attentive, but not active in the physical realm. To instead steady, tune in, and begin the process of internal focus. We go in so that we can go out. And the quote that I want to use, I want to offer as our inspiration for today's pause, today's meditation, comes from Jetsun Milarepa. And he is a Tibetan Buddhist practitioner from the olden days, from 1052 in Tibet to 1135. And what is particularly neat, I think, about his story is that he's renowned as one of the most famous yogis. I don't know what that means. But as a young man, he was a known murderer and then moved energetically towards the practices of compassion as rooted in Buddhism. So if he can be revered, I'm not a murderer, at least that I know of. Yeah, I've killed bugs, right? Yeah, I've killed spirits unintentionally. Yeah, I've harmed others unintentionally. But here's the quote. The bowl that holds my riches becomes my teacher in the very moment that it breaks. The bowl that holds my riches, what I value most, becomes my teacher in the exact moment, in the very moment that it breaks. Now, many Buddhist practitioners, and particularly monks, their only possession is their bowl. And in it, they gather alms or donations from the community to sustain their entire livelihood. Right? Their food, their clothing, their reading material is all communal. So in that sense, if the Buddhist's bowl breaks, in what will they gather their food, their water? What will they contain the riches, the gifts that help them to live? Now, I don't live in a monastery. I don't live in an ashram. I live in the real world. And what we contain, our possessions, our beauty, can vary from person to person. But we're not talking about the banks, right, that hold our money. We're not even talking about the house that is our investment and provides us safety and respite from the world. But what are the containers? And for me, the most powerful container is actually the mind that defines and expects or decides what is or should be. And when that container is broken, do I resist it? Do I fight to hold it together? Do I let it fall apart and let it be the birth of whatever is next? The bowl that holds my riches becomes the teacher in the very moment that it breaks. These crises of containers breaking can happen in an instant. A car accident. Or they can happen in slow motion. A belabored dying of a relationship, or maybe even dying in this life. Both have their challenges, both variations of shift, of change. But the most harmful is when we deny and fail to move through and forward. That's one of the benefits of our meditation practice. So I'm going to be quiet, giving you some content to hold in this space. And if you need some direction, consider what is your container. What is your most prized possession? What is your riches? As a yoga teacher, one of the containers that I am often privileged enough to see break is the definition of yoga. What yoga should look like. Well, if you've spent any time with me, you know, to me, it's all yoga. In other words, how do you contain everything? It frees us of the container, and it frees us from the idea of what is and what is not to just be. Yoga is not just asana postures. Yoga is not just loving kindness or ahimsa. Yoga is not just what happens when I'm paying attention. It's all yoga. And breaking up that container to free myself from not doing asana today and still saying I did yoga. I committed to my practice. It's one of the most freeing realizations that I get to witness in my students. Wait a minute. Yoga doesn't have to mean I perfect Giridasana. Yoga doesn't have to mean that I hurt after I move and push through hard postures. When we can break that container, it gives us agency. When that container is broken by someone else, it can trigger our defenses, our sense of protection and fear. It can rile us up to activate aggressively. When I notice those energies rising, this is the practice of reframing from love. How can I see this as an opportunity for my own growth rather than my own demise? How can I see this from a window of this is what I can do, not what I can no longer do or no longer have? By seeing that the container was only a figment of my imagination, only a manner in which my head brain made sense of what is and what is not. But it's all. The union is way beyond the language that we have words to describe. The bowl that holds my riches becomes my teacher in the very moment that it breaks. As a coach, sometimes I burst those bubbles. Sometimes I break those containers with my students, with my clients. And sometimes they come to me feeling broken, feeling unable to define and contain their energy. Where are you in your sense of defining who you be and your work, your life's work? What is the container of your riches? And how fluid are you in allowing the contents to take the form of another vessel if need be? There was a time, anthropologically, where humans did not have containers. There was no need because there was no abundance. There was no leftovers in terms of food or in terms of even toys. Everything about existence was about survival. And so the container itself is evidence of our abundance. Can you see that? And maybe, just maybe, the breaking of that container is like the turtle that has to grow a new shell, right? It goes through a phase in which it is more vulnerable. That old shell, like a crab, has to move out of its shell before the new one grows and hardens. The same can be said about snakes and other reptiles. They shed their outer skin. But the same is said for us as humans and evolving, becoming. is that as we shed our old selves, our armor that protected us and contained who others thought us to be, we may feel vulnerable and exposed, open to the elements in a way that is, in fact, dangerous. Hence, we turn to our circle for support. And we do the work to either find a new container, an expansive shell that allows us to grow into it, or we shift our priorities and to realize that we didn't need that. That which we were holding on is no longer ours. So my invitation for you as we conclude this Just Pause practice is to spend some time, perhaps considering what is your container. What are the boundaries that you've used to define your riches, your gifts, your talents, your blessings, your abundance? And then what might be extra? What might be no longer necessary and needed? Can you let it go? Because the more we practice mindfully letting go, still strengthens those muscles of having to let go when it's not our choice, when we lose someone or something without having control over that loss.
Bring your attention back into this space.
Back into the container that is your body, the container that is your breath in the lungs. Let the hands come to rest. And just part the fingers. Let them open up like a flower, like a lotus, as perhaps that willingness to break the form, to do it a little differently. May you breathe deeply, move freely, labor lovingly, and live vibrantly. Namaste. Thank you so much for sharing this time with me and being in this practice. To pause, to breathe, to move, to live well. Take care.